Following contains long-lost events. Whenever possible, actual family members in the Brotherhood of Pan have participated in recreating the events. What you're about to see is a Nevertomes broadcast. Tonight, on the Nevertomes, Bordeaux, France, 1613. Private meetings held in at least 3 separate secret compounds were brutally invaded by enforcers of the militaristic French Parliament, leading to countless arrests of otherwise upstanding villagers. 3 of the higher-profile members were unaccounted for: a young Irish woman, her British husband, and their infant son. Experts claim that the groups were there in part to worship an otherworldly figure, thought to be a deity known in the Mediterranean and the Balkans as Pyre des Soleils. Historians have uncovered proof that the detained French citizens were part of a cult devoted to the fiery deity. Belfast, 1553. In a secluded section of the township near the northern border, a similar raid and bust occurs on a grander scale, this time with what eyewitnesses believed to be a flying pirate ship, leading to a mass extermination of villagers and children. Like in Bordeaux, 3 villagers were unaccounted for, this time a husband, a wife, and their preteen daughter. All the bodies were accounted for by the sinister orchestrator of the invasion except for the 3. They appear to have vanished without a trace. And in 1837, Copenhagen, a similar flying nautical craft invades, also plundering and killing. The barbarous pirates targeted and killed most of the town's Jewish population. Sources claim that one young man named Giles survived and was taken captive by the pirates. Within the span of weeks, Giles would find himself literally in another world, liberated by a mysterious miniature human female with fairy wings and a literal head of flame. Their chance meeting would ignite a love that was believed to have been fated. Tragically, both the man and the fairy female would die that same day that they met. There are those that believe that their bond has survived beyond the grave, paving to their rebirth almost 150 years later. 3 poignant stories of kidnapping, lost loves, and war, a true testament to the unpredictable and unforgiving torrents of fate. Join me. You may be able to reignite your faith in the unexplained. Materialize! Belfast, September 19th, 1553. For the most part, the populace had awoken to what they thought would be a typical day. One young man and his brother were tending to the goats on their family's farm on the outskirts when the sun had suddenly eclipsed. The object was too small to be a planetoid, but the dark aura that emanated from it still is detectable today in the outer atmosphere above the Emerald Isle. My elder brother Finn and I, we were doing our daily routines so we could have the day to carouse in town. Something had startled my favourite goat, Kelta, and all the animals suddenly darted out of the meadows into the tall grass leading into the forest. Finn looked up, and the sun did not hurt his eyes. How could it, if it wasn't there? I remember looking up in that same direction. Lo and behold, in place of the sun, there was some kind of... I don't even know how to describe it today. Just a dark fog. Me being of younger age, me eyes were a mite better than me brother Finn's. I told him what I saw, the outline of a pirate ship. I half expected he would say that I was drunk, but he was scared. I never saw him like that. Our first instinct was to check in on Sonia, Uncle Stavros, and our little cousin Shio.
Finn and Ray were not the kind who would stretch the truth in any way, and the looks in their eyes, the unequivocal fear, I knew it was not fake. The farm that Sonia's sister Lena had lived on was further north of Belfast, and by the time the boys came to me, the sun was back, and the craft they saw, it landed way in the southern end of Belfast, closer to my house than where we were at that time.
Stavros and I each took an axe and a pistol, and we ran for all we were worth. My aunt's husband was an intuitive man, and strongly felt that Shio and Aunt Sonia were in the invaders' line of sight. All that went through me mind as we ran closer was seen me little cousin, the girl that I would perch on me lap on Shabbat every week, play with like she was me own little sister, that she was now possibly in the sights of a gaggle of snakes with legs. I prayed to God that I was wrong. When the two arrived at the house, Stavros and Ray's fears were confirmed. The house was ransacked, and Shaban and Sonia were abducted. A mass gathering in the town square would be the last time Shaban would ever see her parents. These invaders were emotionless, evil, sadistic. I wouldn't even call them human. No human could be so devoid of decency and so fueled by malice as to force the parents to choose between being slain or in a perverted act. Force them to put their own children in iron cages at gunpoint, drop them into the sea. The ringleader of the pirates was this petulant younger man named Joso, and the leader of the invasion was apparently his father. My family was slain since my mother was a mite too old to suit the needs of the captain, and he had already taken my aunt and her husband, so Joso threatened me as if Shir was my own daughter. She my own daughter. I loved her so much. I would do anything to protect her, and that's what I did. Little did I realize the path that it would take for both of us. If I had to do it over again, I'm not sure if I would have done it different or not. I would have just prayed that fate would have been softer and kinder to her. Ray had been given the same ultimatum, but since he was able-bodied enough to be useful, but not to pose a threat, his life would be spared. Only if his loyalty would be proved to the captain and his son in that same act. Today, the airborne pirates invaded this village would become known as the Belfast Slaughter, claimed the lives of 79 children, ages 7 to 14, 200 women, and 703 men. All in the span of 2 weeks did these ghastly killings occur. The first day of the slaughter was the forcible drafting of younger men and capture of mature women who could still bear children. Ray Hart had his cousin's life in his hands, and a scared Shaban feared that he would kill her. This was not what happened. Me little cousin was only 12, and I'd already been forced into watching horror as others who were even younger than her were executed by their own parents, and then to be enslaved. Over the past 500 years that I have lived in an otherworldly dimension, I've showered many a time, but to this day, I still nearly feel clean. And I don't think I ever will. Not after the things that I've seen, the stuff that I was forced to do. The pirates had stolen everything from us, but still believed we would be loyal out of fear. I used that to my own advantage. Finn and I used to have dealings with a man by the name of Archie Bochik. He was slime to be sure, but nae as bad as these pirates. In all the instances that I could have been wrong, I had been certain that this would be one of those times. I didn't learn it until many years later, but Bochik was nearly to be trusted any more than Joso and his bastard father. I took the butt of me pistol and spirited her away in a burlap sack, and I made sure he had her on board classified as cargo. Unfortunately, in his act of desperation to cling to what little family he had left, Ray Hart realized the enormity of his mistake. I might as well have given me mother's chickens to a weasel. That's what Bochik was, and what he did to my little Shaban proved it. With no intention of keeping up his end of the deal, Archibald Bochik went behind Ray's back and sold Shaban to a man in another dimension. Like he had done to so many other innocent children, Bochik auctioned Shaban off to the highest bidder in a black market auction. Was sold to a man who kept her as his slave. He was conditioning her for her spirit to be broken, for her to be reduced to a feral beast that would serve him as his own personal assassin. It was 500 years on Earth that passed, but in the place where I was, it was only 20 or 30 years. And for me it was hell and purgatory all rolled up into one. I was forced to be indentured to the lowly gumbeans who invaded me village and murdered me family. Damn thing that I could do to break them apart, to destroy them from the inside like I wanted to. I had just hoped that higher powers would intervene somehow, that they would eventually get their comeuppance, and if I was to take it as well, I would have been happy to take that plunge, to atone for what I was forced to do. The man who bought her at that ghastly auction, if I had known who he really was and what he had done, I would have gutted him. But I was an errand boy for him, just like I was to the boy and his father. I did not know any of it was going on. I did not find all this out until 2019 in the Neverscape when I fled the Gulag with a bunch of other pirates that were captured. I was staring down the business end of this girl's blades. She had a bow cut, and she had scars on her face. It was Shaban. She had grown up so much, and her appearance had changed. I didn't know it was her at first. She knew only one capacity. She could only remember that I was the one who sent her on that path. Our familial connection was forgot, much to me dismay. The only reason that I'm still breathing here today is because Mina intervened. The other cousin, Ray's bold move to spirit Shaban away was a risky endeavor, and one of the people who would later come to witness the outcome of this, Jesse David Schuchart, has agreed to appear on our broadcast to share what he knows. For reasons of his safety, Nevertomes has agreed with his request that his face stay hidden for his own protection, and that he be interviewed via Zoom. From what I understood, this girl was the elder half-sister of the girl now calling herself Petra Pan, the spawn of the pirate leader who invaded Belfast, and his unwilling servant Sonia Elachad. The man who held Shaban captive was pure evil. His eyes were as dark as a coal mine, and his learned intellect was similar to the villain from the movie Tron, David Warner. My sister Sophie and I, we had only recently been ascended as Knights of Pan with our girlfriends and their sister Nicole as our teammates and leaders. We were just coming into our own, and this was thrust upon us. Jesse Schuchart, age 21, the fiancé of Knight of Pan Cavalier leader Ariella Jones, found himself in a front row seat to the events that poor Horatio Hart had never meant to set in motion, starting with Shaban's reemergence in 2019 and the irreparable damage that it almost caused, were it not for higher forces. Now, before we were ascended, we'd seen a lot of weird stuff, from a diamond that possessed a toxic curse, to a culmination in Nicole's own self-hatred, keeping her captive in her own mind. But when this sicko sent a spiritually empty and cold Shaban to kill Nicole in a bid to break apart the Trinity, that was the most unnerving thing I've ever experienced. Thankfully, Petra was able to rekindle Shaban's heart, and Nicole was able to drop the charade of her death as a means of staying safe from Shaban's master. While Shaban has been liberated and reunited with her parents, and formed a friendship with her half-sister Mina and half-brother Philippe. She's even found love in Mina and Philippe's adoptive Nevertribe sister, Princess Liger. The scars of her past still linger, as the scars do on her face that Fey magic would not be able to heal. Who was the man that held Shaban captive? Why did she never try to escape? And what is his connection to Arthurian legends? These questions will be further explored in an upcoming broadcast. Coming up next, the mysterious cult of magic-sensitive humans with a penchant for fire. Fire. Over the course of the millennia, innumerable cults have cropped up, promising spiritual enlightenment and greatness. Often misguided disciples would flock to a fanatical, often deluded megalomaniac. More often than not, these cults would fade into obscurity, or be disbanded forcibly. One member of a specific cult from the 17th century has gotten in touch with the Nevertomes, and has provided us with insight. For this individual's safety, he has requested that we address him as Boris.
I had come to this group looking for something to believe in. If I had known or been told that I would actually see what I saw, I would have scooped out on eyes and soaked them in cognac.
Boris claims that in the 10 years he had been intermeshed in this mysterious group, their infant son stayed an infant, and the leaders never changed, never aged. Also, they were very reclusive, impossible to locate for any member underneath a certain echelon. To anyone's knowledge, in the village of Bordeaux, these two figures were utter phantoms.
I had come to know this man. He was unlike other cult leaders. He did not want anything from his disciples. Hell, the purpose of the cult was not even for their own profit. We were divided into higher and lower echelons. I found myself propelled past the level of median. I did not understand why. I got to observe the clandestine meetings. This man, he felt I could be trusted. Now don't get me wrong, the two of them, the man and his wife, they were nice enough, but something about them just not sit right with me. I always felt a sort of chill, like I could never feel calm.
According to Boris, the higher echelon members were hooded figures in what could only be described as fire-resistant robes. Nevertomes. They were advanced users in the study of pyrokinesis, the mental manipulation of live flame. But apart from this one clue as to the cult's infrastructure, the puzzle is still undiscernible. What was their main goal? For the answer to this, we must take a journey, for the place we seek lies on the first star to the right of Polaris until sunrise. March of 1837, Copenhagen, Denmark. On the 15th, the date that would indeed live up to its weary legend as the Ides of March. 'Twas the last time I ever saw my sister Leia. They stole her from me. I guess, if you think about it, it was the other way around. Giles Chaim Morgenstern, age 17, found himself struck by a cruel twist of fate. For reasons that were lost upon him, he was spared the slaughter of the other villagers of their family's synagogue. After being shanghaied from the town that he had known all his life as home, Giles had plenty of time to reflect on all that he lost, and the unknown path that lay ahead. For all he knew, he would be treading this path alone, for he had lost the thing that he valued most in this world, his family. In the era that we did in Copenhagen, we weren't the richest of families, far from it. Whenever things were difficult, no matter what happened, I could always count on Leia, and she in turn could always count on me. I loved her so much. I loved her more than anything. I never even got the chance to say goodbye. I just felt so empty at the prospect of never being able to see Leia Morgenstern ever again. I always held out hope that I would, that somehow, some way, fate would guide me back to her. Usually, men my age, they leave to get away from their families. That was not the case with me. Leia was my rock. She was the one I could trust most of all with anything, any problem. She taught me never to be afraid to express how I feel, or that you're never too old to have faith in the unexplained. She always believed, and in turn I believed, not just because of her, but she was the one who instilled it in me. I never dreamed that the faith that she would give me would guide me throughout all of this to something so wonderful, even throughout all the adversity that I had to go through to get there. Leia, if you can hear this, I never forgot you. I never stopped loving you. I'll always keep you in my heart. Giles was kept in solitude on board that ship. Barely any light, just enough food to survive. The timeline, according to Giles, is spotty at best, but the events that he was able to listen in on are as clear and indelible today as they were back then. This man calling himself James Hook had this gravelly, domineering voice, full of rage and hatred. The room they kept me in was near the bottom of the ship, but I could still hear his demonic bellowing. What he said about why he singled me out did not make sense. Every time he or his detestable crew members so much as even took a breath of air, I felt such a deep-seated terror that my teeth would twinge. Giles had ample opportunity to hear his kidnapper's rantings. Due to his differing dialect, most of it would be lost in translation, but two words were used more so often than others. Buried treasure. That's all Hook's rantings about Giles apparently were, and possibly why all the other young men were held prisoner on that ship and were forced into labor when they hit land. That his belief in fae and magic was unparalleled. All the captors' faith was, and it was just enough to help the pirates reach the source of the treasure that they had sought to plunder. To Hook, fae treasure in his mind meant only one thing: riches with untapped magical power, the ultimate tool for world dominion. In the mysterious, anomalous patch of sea known as the infamous Bermuda Triangle, the ship was believed to have breached the gateway and landed in the balmy seas that do not exist physically on this planet. Not long after they hit land, Giles was part of the away team of other captives and their masters to this mysterious island. A bump on the head, on a palm tree in the inner geography of the island would bring Giles face to face with a girl when he came to.
I remember hitting my head against the tree. Something startled me. That part is all a blur. And also, how I was able to get from the lower part of the island to the bluff overlooking the waterfall. I was too stunned to even try to solve that equation right there. The answer was given for me in the form of my rescuer, as I would find out. She had introduced herself as Solon Fire, F-Y-R-E. The sound of her voice was so heavenly. It was scratchy, it was raspy. There's something about the cadence of her voice. It did something to me. And that was before I could even get a good look at her. She was flittering around in such a blue streak that I couldn't scarcely make her out. I wasn't sure. I thought that I was dreaming, or I had gone to the great beyond. The throbbing pain that I had in my knees and the bump on my head were all the proof I needed that I was still among the living. Solon, she recognized me somehow. I'm not sure how, but it was as if she was waiting for me.
Giles had a hard time seeing what this girl looked like. She was darting around like a firefly that had downed an entire case of Red Bull mixed with high-octane espresso. She was drawn to him, and he was smitten with her. The Nevertribe's elders didn't trust him because he wore the clothes of a pirate. But Solon sensed his innocence, and in this chance meeting, it finally all fell into place. She had literally dreamt of her true love. She had a sixth sense, and Giles's voice was the same one as in her premonition, and he had brown hair and brown eyes. It was a minute detail, but it was something that she had predicted. Queen Aurora knew that he was the one that Solon had pined for. Fate had taken a turn and dropped him into Solon's lap. Not literally. What no one would realize is that the cult based in France and other parts of Europe, as a parent caste of pyrokinetic spellcasters, were established in reverence of the pixie and fae that Giles Morgenstern would awaken to on that fateful day. Across Europe, she was known as Fire de Soleil, but her name was Solon Natalia Fire, with the last name Pan, as in Peter Pan. I had never seen anything like her. She was less than a foot tall, floating aloft on sparkling wings. Her voice was high-pitched, with a scratchy rasp to it. Her eyes, when one would look at her eyes, they would think she was demonic. But her eyes were her most angelic feature. Black sclerae with bright white irises with no pupils. Not 2 minutes into first meeting her, that I myself fell for her like a ton of bricks. She had me under her enchantment. Whatever she was feeling for me, I was feeling back for her. There was no rational explanation for how I was feeling about her. She awakened something in me, just like I had awakened something in her. It could have been faith-based, it could have been the way she looked, it could have been destiny. Whatever it was, I was in love with her, and she was in love with me. It was a gift from the universe to each of us, and we embraced it. I had only known her not even for 5 minutes, but my heart was hers. I wanted her to love me, and she did. She wanted my love. I gave it to her freely. It was a silent declaration, but it was loud in our hearts. I, Giles Morgenstern, was in love with Solon Natalia Fire Pan. It did not sit well with her Slivsonoft Peter Pan, or the Nevertribe. The only one who accepted me besides her was Queen Aurora herself, a woman every bit as charming and wonderful as Solon herself. No surprise considering that they were best friends.
Solon was a firecracker in the truest sense of the word, full of spirit and love. She confided in me a lot, that she had seen visions of the future and interacted with them like she had been a part of it. A lot of the things that she would talk about after these epiphanies would baffle us, none more so than me. Words like Wi-Fi, air hockey, Xerox, Decepticons, none of us could understand this language. We often thought it was because she used my brother's firewater as a mouthwash. One other youth, besides Peter and Giles, carried Solon's fervor in such a fiery fervor. In Western culture he is known as Slightly, but to Solon she always called him Sly.
And now, a special Nevertomes Mythbuster. We now return to the Nevertomes. Before Giles Morgenstern ever landed in Neverland Prime, there was one other boy who held out affection for the vivacious Solon Fire. He was none other than Peter's top lieutenant, the de facto leader of the Lost Boys, Slightly M. Zoyel, the brother of Nibs. He joins us now via Psycon to share what he knows of his long-lost friend.
She was always energetic, to be sure, and could often show signs of a fiery temper, but that was just a sliver of her. Solon Fire was a creature that radiated love like a nova. That day when Hook's ship docked in Neverland, I'll never forget it as long as I live. My brother Nibs and I saw everything that happened on the Never Beach, because the Lost Boys were too stupid to realize they should have stayed back. Because of this, that I will never get the chance to tell Solon what was really in my heart for her. That's one of the biggest regrets that I ever had. I had plenty of chances to tell her. Giles, in my opinion, is a very lucky man, and if he had lived, I would have been happy just as long as Solon was happy. But I know that she loved me back, in her own way. She was flirtatious and peppy, but she was more comfortable around me than she was with all the other Lost Boys. We did almost everything together. I think deep down she did know how I felt.
Giles' love for Solon was proven to the Never Tribe and Peter himself by warning of Hook's imminent attack on the coast, and defecting to the Lost Boys under the code name Tiger. Hook had reached land with a group of impulsive Lost Boys at the ready, not realizing the magnitude of the danger they were in. Giles followed Solon to the Never Beach to help Sly get the boys away to safety, but both were taken captive by Hook as Peter made his way to that same location from Aurora's palace. Would keep Shanghaied Giles as a traitor. Hook took him as a hostage, demanding that Solon take him to what he thought was the island's cache of fairy treasure. Solon and Giles tried to disabuse the desperate captain of this delusion, telling him that those gold and silver pieces that he was looking for, that he had breached the gateway to Neverland for, was no different than anything that he would ever plunder on Earth. They contained no magical power other than an extra bit of spark. Fairy treasure in that respect was a blind to what actual fairy treasure was, something that James Hook himself would never figure out, but something that Giles Morgenstern had figured out the instant he laid his eyes on Solon Fire. Believing the so-called explanation of fairy treasure to be a deception, Hook continued to vent his rage on both Giles and Solon, as the latter too tried to keep the Lost Boys as far away as possible. Solon, though in fear of her life and Giles's, remained stoic and defiant, offering an ultimatum of her own. If any harm came to Giles, Peter, the Lost Boys, the Never Tribe, the royal family, or herself, what little magic she possessed would keep the crew of the Jolly Roger trapped in the Prime Never Zone forever. Just as Peter got to the beach at his highest speed, Hook had impaled the Pixian Fae with his iron coil, a well-known vulnerability to all pixies. Being the sadistic monster we all know him to be, the bad captain outright said to Solon that he did not BELIEV ... in fairies, poisoning her with a toxic Nescomp substance. Witnessing this had a grave effect on both her father and her true love. Peter's rage was at its highest apex, and in his frenzy had chopped off Hook's hand. To show his foe how bloodthirsty he was for what happened to Solon, he threw the disembodied hand into the water, just in time for the resident crocodile's dinner, giving the creature its century-spanning craving for the rest of him. A profusely bleeding Hook struggled to row back to the ship as Peter picked up the crystallized fey wings that remained after Solon's body evaporated into nothing from her death. Solon was gone. Hook and his crew were permanently trapped in the Prime Zone with a red X on all their backs. And Giles, in his unspeakable grief, started to grow cold and lifeless, his essence draining along with his tears. Memories of that horrible day were softened thanks to blue pixie dust sprinkled on him by Princess Madalena Faye Ariana Jennings Jones of the Never Tribe, who at that time was 6 Never cycles old. This was done so that Peter would be able to continue his life of adventure and sport, as seen in the media we have all grown up with. The original play, Peter and Wendy, was created at the beginning of the 20th century by Sir James Barrie, but the presence of the cult of Solon worshippers appears to have been long before Barrie ever took ink to paper. There's no telling when Peter and Solon Fire were actually born on Earth, but there are those who believe that the cult had come long before then.
The founder of the cult, they were believed to be soothsayers or prophets. Somehow they were able to see into the future, same as Solon, but what they saw was far ghastlier.
Solon's lore was well established by the followers of this mysterious group, and their followers devoutly emulated her. Today the cult is believed to have long been shuttered. Members have either died out or were exiled when evil would manifest in their hearts. To this day, not a scrap of evidence has been found in any part of Europe to substantiate that they ever existed. However, the night this broadcast first aired, we received some new information concerning the cult of Solon through our telecenter. Giles Morgenstern's reincarnation rejoins us on our broadcast. He is none other than Jesse David Schuchard himself. Once again, we have been asked to keep his face hidden. Nevertomes has complied with his request. God must love soap operas because he modeled our lives after them. Misty's time mapping spell brought to light 3 major things. 1. Giles had a sister named Leia. 2. Leia was reborn as my sister Sophie. And 3. Leia Morgenstern's daughter was a woman named Rivka Safarceder, my great-great-great-grandmother on the Schuchard side of our family. It's hard not to brood on the oddity of the fact that, in effect, I am my own uncle, and that my sister was my own grandmother, but I try my best not to call too much attention to it.
In the Heritage Journals, we teach about what happens to it is actually plausible in this modern era of thinking. No one knows. But what we teach is souls have a temperature of sorts. Solon and Leia each were passionate beings from all accounts, but Giles's manner of death was counterintuitive of his bodily health. I was there that night when he took his last breaths. His heart grew cold and empty. He had lost the love of his life in such a brutal and traumatic way. It was only natural that his spirit would lose its vitality, and it was in dying of such a broken heart that affected the part of Jesse that would come from Giles that contained the man he once was. It was cut off from Jesse for good.
Both Silver Dart and Nicole have tried to explain it to me, and it takes so much effort to keep my own heart from growing cold and creating a continuous cycle. Giles is a part of me, but because of the manner in which he died, he is dormant in my spirit. I mean, the part of me that lived in that time period, the experiences and memories that separate him from who I am now. I can't interact with him the way Ariella does with Solon and the way my sister does with our grandmother Leia. Giles' spirit had literally died of a broken heart, like being frozen in near absolute zero conditions. Like trying to unfreeze a skeleton. It can be done, but it's not the same as it once was. In this case, the lack of vitality means that I can't interact with him personally, but people like Henry Silva are able to bring him back. They're able to bring him back, but I'm never going to be able to directly speak to him. I would give anything to hear what he had to say. Whether I'm living up to
his example, if he would have loved me as a nephew, if his spirit was still able to see.
Surprisingly, Jesse would get his wish. A recently discovered clip of Jesse under hypnosis as his counterpart Giles has come to light. In the recording, Giles has made a special message to his reincarnation/distant nephew. We have invited Jesse Schuchart back into the studio so that he can watch it live.
I remember the way that I died, and I knew that I wasn't supposed to come back. I could just feel it. I'd reconciled with that, but when that man with the high cheekbones and the pocket watch told me about all this, how I was brought up to speed, I look at the man that I am now. Apart from the fact that my body is virtually identical to his, which is very disconcerting to say the least, from what I've understood about this young man and the company that he keeps, he's given me a wonderful gift. And I want him to know that. My sister Leia lives on as his sister, so in essence, she is my sister again. I have the comfort that I do have family left in the world, that my own distant nieces and nephews play such a vital role in this, and that they are helping others. Jesse David Schuchart, you may never hear my voice again. I may never even awaken again. But if that is the case, I want you to know that I am proud of you. I am proud of you and Sophie, your brother Sandy, and your nephew Ben. I know that you will be a good uncle to him, and I know that you are a wonderful father to Joseph Scote, the one that I was blessed with. Please, I ask you that you give Nufa Chatel the love and care that I could never give her. I would have given anything to know her. You know her now as Natasha. Please, give her my love. Let her and her sister Via Hafta, Ginger Snap, know that I am proud, that my spirit does live on in all of you, and that you have made it so that I can now rest in peace. And one final thing to my dear beloved Solan Fire, the fact that you are alive again, and that some part of me is with you again. That's the greatest gift of all. I still love you, even beyond the grave. Please know that, even if you can't detect my spirit anymore. Farewell, beloved. Huh? What happened? Why am I crying? Mr. Silva, can you hand me a tissue?
Yes, of course.
Upon hearing this, we got Jesse's reaction.
Well, Magnus, I don't know what to say. I think the tears that I'm crying speak for themselves. I can look at myself better in the mirror now, and I promise you, Giles, I will never take my siblings for granted, or my children. I will keep fighting the good fight, and I will do it in your name. But most of all, I will make sure that your bond to Solon stays alive through my bond with AJ. That is a Pan Schuchart pact.
Next on our broadcast, Morning Miss Jonescart, the sister of Vea Hafta Morgenstern, has unearthed evidence of her own, linking Solon Fire to the mysterious cult. Update. Neverscape and Zetascapian authorities need your help. Agents are advising all magic-sensitive beings to be on the lookout for a person of interest in both the grim fate of the mysterious cult of Solon Fire and the kidnapping and near murders of Shaban El-Akhad and her parents. Eyewitnesses have consulted with Zetascape agents and have come up with a composite sketch. Though he is believed to play a key role in each of the events discussed in tonight's broadcast, he is only wanted for questioning and not considered a suspect at the present time. He goes by the name Fingers McNulty, though this may be an alias. He is a Caucasian male, 5'9", weighs 192 pounds, middle-aged with graying brown hair, and a distinctive tattoo of a scimitar piercing a human skull on his left shoulder. Due to his connection to dark magics and maritime crime syndicates, McNulty should be considered armed, unstable, and extremely dangerous. If you see him, do not approach him. Contact the Zetascapian authorities via Psychon. Reach out with your mind while the moon is at its highest apex in the night sky and transmit the last known coordinates where McNulty was spotted. Operators will not have access to your name or identity, so you can choose to remain anonymous. Over the centuries, many unexplainable phenomena have occurred. The Shroud of Turin, the fate of Amelia Earhart, and the sudden mysterious deaths of Mel Blanc and George O'Hanlon during production of the Jetsons movie, and Orson Welles and Scatman Crothers during the production of Transformers the movie. Why do these events happen? Maybe it is fate, maybe it is divine intervention, or perhaps it is just a secret that man and Fae were not meant to know. As was the case with the disappearance of Siobhan Ellicott from Belfast in 1553, and the emergence of the mysterious female founder of the Solon cult almost a century later. According to Neverscape laureates, the female founder went by the last name LaFay. Her first name was never revealed. The practice of pyrokinesis is taboo in most religious institutions. However, the cult's creed was to preserve the innocent. Few bits of evidence, apart from Boris, have withstood the test of time, but it is believed that the cult was not bent on the destruction of Earth, but rather of saving it. Update. On the night of our broadcast, our Psycon telecenter picked up an unusual reading. From this tip, the evidence needed to unlock the secrets of the so-called Solon cult has been found. I was with me cousin Siobhan and members of Team Panfan beneath what we thought were the catacombs under Remington Springs, Missouri. I don't know where we were, but Shio had come across a book from her little sister Mina's half-brother's book repository back in Petra's Neverland. Angus O'Shaughnessy had no such book in his catalogue. From what Chief Dajanotan and his brother Silverdog told us, it was a book that didn't belong there. There we were, Shio and me, in pan-shield bubbles floating aloft, each reading a copy of the book that was magically split in two. When we each got to this one page, Siobhan's face seemed to blanch with fright, and with Siobhan Felicity Elcha, that nary be a small feat. What horrifying sight did Horatio Hart and Siobhan Elcha see on that page? According to Hart, they happened upon an illustrated portrait of both Siobhan and the man who held her captive for over 500 Earth years, the man known to her as Mordred LaFay. The rest of the book has a literal iron lock, so the latter half of the book is, at the present time, untouchable. However, according to sworn statements by both the Never tribes of Neverland Prime and Petra's Neverland, the book was confirmed to be not a part of Schmidt's book repository, nor was the book from the Infinitus Library on the star Polaris. At the present time, this otherworldly scripture is being examined by experts of the Never and Zetascapes. According to independent spectrographic engineers, there is no doubt of its authenticity, but what other secrets it hides, Siobhan's role in the seemingly happy marriage to the man who enslaved her, and the son that was never heard from again, is a poignant and unsettling unsolved mystery. For every magical event, somehow, somewhere, there is proof. From all of us at the Nevertomes and Random Mind Studios, good night and stay safe.